Greetings, weary travelers. My name is Vincent Price, and this is my world. Tonight I offer you passage into the darkest recesses of the supernatural. Tonight, the Price Mansion has turned into a den of spooky horrors. All done for your viewing pleasure. For those of you who are faint of heart and weak of stomach, I must warn you, this program is filled with suspense, horror, the weird, and the disturbing, just like a celebrity reality show. Once again, it's that time of year when the tombs come open and the spirits arise.
Can we cut the smoke, please? Okay.
Halloween. It is a celebration observed in several countries on October 31st, the eve of the Western Christian feast of All Hallows Day. It is also the time during the year dedicated to remembering the dead, including saints, martyrs, and all the faithfully departed. It is widely believed that many Halloween traditions originated from ancient Celtic harvest festivals, particularly the Gaelic festivals of Samhain. But as interesting as the history of Halloween is, let us not forget what is the most important part of it. And it is, of course, trick-or-treating, or as it's called in other countries, goozing or souling. Halloween's also all about attending Halloween costume parties, carving pumpkins into jack-o'-lanterns, lighting bonfires with best friends, and telling scary stories, apple bobbing, playing games, playing pranks, visiting haunted attractions, as well as watching your occasional horror film, of course. And let's not forget about all the other spooky stuff that happens all tonight. But wait, which camera am I on? I'm currently having a Halloween party right now, with the most distinguished of guests attending. You're fully welcome to join us after the program is over. There will be snacks, drinks, ghosts, and maybe even a few murders. Halloween is a special time for me. It's a time for reflection, a time to look back and be grateful for all the wonderful memories that have been made over the long lifetime, and all those wonderful tricks we've been treating for. It is a time to also sit down, eat a bowl of candy, I seriously hope I don't get diabetes this year, and watch some scary movies and enjoy the sound of wonderful Halloween carols and other delightful screams. For those of you who do not know this, I am very obsessed with the arts, especially when it comes to paintings. Observe this wonderful portrait of myself that was done by a friend. Look how lifelike it is. It's almost like it can pop off the portrait.
Moving on.
The classic horror icons. Lon Chaney Jr., Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi. Ooh, and who's that handsome devil? Why, it's me, Vincent Price, of course. These creatures are what made your flesh crawl, gave you nightmares, and brought cardiac arrest to the masses. But despite being called monsters, I see these creatures as dear friends of mine, each being misunderstood. In fact, I think most just wanted to be treated with some manner of kindness. But honestly, I think they just only needed a girlfriend. I mean, come on, really. After all, it was beauty that tamed the beast, am I right? Or killed him, I forget which. In fact, I think it's the Universal Monsters that should be credited with making Halloween so popular today. Before we start our little spooky storytelling, let me ask you, do you believe in ghosts? Good. Now we can begin. Now it's time for spooky story time. Very few things go more in hand with Halloween than jack-o'-lanterns. Every year, starting October 1st, carved pumpkins start to pop up on every porch and windowsill in every single neighborhood. Today, making your own jack-o'-lantern is like a wholesome Halloween activity for the whole family to enjoy. Of course, it's just a problem for the person who has to clean them up after they start getting smashed. But the origin story of the jack-o'-lantern is actually far from innocent or a simple child's tale. This story begins on Mischief Night, the evening before Halloween, when troublemakers would roam the streets and wreak havoc on townspeople. On this night in the 19th century Ireland, there was a man named Stingy Jack who was the greatest prankster of them all and was a very, very bad man. But of course, like all men, Stingy Jack eventually died. It was probably the alcohol that killed him. Either way, it was his turn to finally meet his maker. And as luck would have it, God had no interest in Stingy Jack and refused him entering to heaven. So what other place was there for Stingy Jack to go? Well, of course, the devil welcomed him into hell. But of course, Stingy Jack was not interested in burning in the lake of fire for all of eternity. So he made a deal with the devil. He said that he would bet his whole soul that the devil could not turn himself into a silver coin. The devil mocked this challenge and decided to turn himself into a coin to prove Jack wrong. Jack immediately snatched the coin as soon as the devil had turned into it and deposited it into his pocket next to a silver cross that he had been carrying for just such an occasion. Thus, the devil could not change himself back, and Jack refused to allow the devil to go free until the devil had promised him not to claim his soul for at least another 10 years. The devil, feeling already embarrassed, as one could hardly imagine, agreed to his terms and granted Jack his life back for at least another 10 years. 10 years had quickly passed, and the devil had come to collect his dues from Jack. Jack, fearing for his soul, decided to play one more prank on the devil. So he made him another challenge. He asked him, "Before I go, can you please jump into that tree over there and grab me an apple so I can have one last treat from this world?" The devil, thinking he had nothing left to lose, jumped up into the tree to retrieve the apple. But as soon as he did, Jack placed crosses all around the trunk of the tree, thus trapping the devil once again. This time, Jack made the devil promise him that he would not take his soul when he died. Seeing no way around this humiliating predicament, the devil agreed, cursing Jack as he returned to hell. Jack then returned to his lonely cottage, laughing the whole way through, realizing that he had tricked the devil yet again. However, 100 years passed, and Stingy Jack was still alive somehow. He was curious why this was. Not that he complained too much, for he could commit all the crimes and sin and pranks that he wanted. However, even eternity can get boring sometimes. In fact, Stingy Jack got so boring of living so long that he decided to try to kill himself yet again. This time, he knew for a fact that God would not let him into heaven, and unfortunately for him, the devil didn't want him in his domain either. The devil merely mocked him and told him that he had kept his end of the bargain and that Jack would have to spend the rest of eternity roaming the world. Jack merely said, "But where can I go?" And the devil replied, "Back to where you came from. Down back the windy and dark path to your lonely little existence." Stingy Jack pleaded with the devil to at least provide him with a light to help him find his way back to his house. The devil, as a final gesture, in a mockery, tossed Jack an ember straight from the fires of hell. Jack placed the ember in a hollowed-out pumpkin, one of Jack's favorite foods, which he would always steal. And from that day forward, Stingy Jack has been doomed to roam the earth without a resting place, and with only his lit pumpkin to light the way through the darkness of this world. So in case you're wondering, that's why we have jack-o'-lanterns out in the front yards all the time. Hope you enjoyed that story. Next is the legend of Sleepy Hollow, truly one with a bunch of spooky horrors in it. The story follows a very skinny school teacher named Ichabod Crane as he begins his journey to a Halloween party, much like the one we're having right now. In fact, I should probably begin to that very quickly, but I'll finish my story with you very fast. So first of all, Ichabod Crane is in love with a young woman named Katrina. He really wants to get with her. I can understand why. Unfortunately, like all great challenges in life, there is an obstacle in Ichabod's way. The young, large, and muscular Braun Jones. A man who also is trying to pine for the attentions and the affection of the young Katrina. Together, they both decide to play pranks on each other. After all the activities and all the other festivities during the Halloween party, we get down to the spooky stories. Braun decides to tell Ichabod the story of the Headless Horseman, which is Sleepy Hollow's most famous supernatural phenomenon. It is the ghost of a headless horseman. The Headless Horseman is said to be the ghost of a Hessian soldier who lost his head to a cannonball during the Revolutionary War. The horseman is seen most often riding by the church, Braun says, where local historians say he was buried. He is believed to be always in search of his missing head. This story begins to fascinate Ichabod, but it also begins to scare him as well. Bron then warns Ichabod that if he is to ever run to the horseman, that he must ride across the bridge because the horseman cannot cross a running water in the river. Ichabod is fascinated by the story, and although he's terrified, he decides that it's just Bron playing jokes with him. As soon as the story is over, the party is also over, and it is now time for Ichabod to return home. Unfortunately, his path home is the scariest, darkest road in all of Sleepy Hollow. He finds the path home very dark and eerily quiet. He tries to keep himself from getting too scared, believing Bron's story to be merely for children. But soon, after he has passed the possibly haunted tree that Bron warned him of, he sees a large, dark figure looming nearby. He calls out to the stranger, but the stranger does not respond to his call. But as he passes by, he starts to move and starts chasing Ichabod down the path, riding a large, dark horse. Ichabod is greatly disturbed by this and tries to shake off his pursuer, but he fails. Finally, he notices that the rider has no head on his shoulders. The head seems to be sitting on the saddle in front of the man. Ichabod tries to get his poor little horse to run faster home, and as the horseman starts to catch up to him, Ichabod starts to panic, and he starts to try to ride his horse faster and faster and faster. But he is not a skilled rider, and the horse begins to resist, slowing down with the horseman right on his tail. They end up by the old church, the scene of most of the ghost stories of the Headless Horseman, and Ichabod races to the bridge, the one that Bron warned him. Get out. Ichabod races across the bridge, but stops to look back. He sees that the horseman is indeed not able to cross the bridge. He begins to take a breath of fresh relief that he's successful in his escape from the Headless Horseman. However, he decides not to keep on moving. Instead, he just looks back one last time at the horseman. And as he looks on, the Headless Horseman picks up his head and throws it at Ichabod. Ichabod then lets out a large scream as the head hits his head. The next day, Ichabod's horse returns to its owner's farm, but there is no sign of Ichabod. A search party finds hoof prints near the bridge, where Ichabod's hat is also found, with a smashed pumpkin left next to it. Ichabod was never heard from again in Sleepy Hollow, although later on it seems that he is alive elsewhere and has told his story to many other people. Some of the townspeople believe that Brom Jones pulled off a great prank on Ichabod and scared him away, since he later married the fair Katrina. But the old story of the Headless Horseman still lives on and scares people to this day. So please be careful when you're returning home, because you might also have a run-in with the Headless Horseman. This next story I'm about to tell you is one of Hispanic origin. It is one that many parents have used to scare the little children to go to bed early or to behave. This, of course, is the story of La Llorona, the weeping woman. Back in the early days in Mexico, there was a young woman. She was meek, but she was a kind-hearted woman, and she had gained the attentions of a young gentleman. She had fallen so deeply in love with him that she decided that he was indeed the man she wanted to marry. Eventually they did marry, and she thought she couldn't be happier. She then had 2 children, which she felt only increased her wonderful happiness. Sadly, one day when she was playing with her children in the flower pastures, she accidentally caught a glimpse of her wonderful husband and a woman in his arms. Not only was this woman younger than her, she was everything that she ever wanted to be, and she could see the way her husband looked at her. All she could do was just stand there and watch as they went away in their magical carriage. In shock and in complete anger, she completely went insane. She then grabbed both her children and decided to walk straight home, full of anger for what she had seen her husband doing. She walked past the lake. In her brief insanity, she took her children to give them a quick bath. But as they started struggling, she began to dunk their heads underneath the water. As they struggled more and more, she grew angrier and angrier and finally drowned them. Only afterward did she realize what she had done, and she started screaming in pure agony. She started screaming in Spanish, "Mis hijos! Mis hijos!" Which means, my children, oh, what have I done, oh God? Yes, she had killed her children, and now there was only one thing left for her to do. Unable to live with what she had done, she drowned herself. Shortly afterward, the townspeople started noticing a ghostly young woman in a white dress roaming the streets, screaming at the top of her lungs, "Mis hijos! Mis hijos!" All the townspeople were scared for the sake of their children, which they would keep close to themselves, and they would always warn them never to go near any body of water, because they would tell their children that La Llorna would get them and drown them as well. And to this day, all Hispanic families warn their children not to go out at night, not to go near the water, because La Llorona might get them. Oh, I'm sorry, is this getting too scary for you? But I thought you liked scary things. It's fun to scare people after all. Come on, you love it. Time for our next story. This is the story of the Telltale Heart, which is a first-person narrative of an unnamed narrator, a man who insists that he is sane when he is actually insane. Ironic, isn't it? The man lives with his father, an old man that he describes as a clouded, pale, blue man with a vulture-like eye, which distresses the narrator so much that the narrator plots to murder the old man simply because he cannot stand the very sight of this evil eye, as he describes it. Despite this, the narrator claims that he still loves his father, but he just cannot stand him anymore, or that evil-looking eye. The narrator decides that he will kill his father, but in a very humane way. The narrator of this story continues to insist that he is sane, simply because he is being so careful in making the arrangements for the murder, which are as follows. For at least 7 nights, the narrator opens the door of the old man's room in order to shine a sliver of light onto the evil eye. However, the old man's vulture eyes always close, and he never awakens, which does not cause the man to want to kill his father, simply to close the door and to try again the next night. After 7 nights, the narrator simply can't find the will to kill his father. However, on the 8th night, the old man awakens after the narrator hand slips and makes a noise, and he says, "Who's there?" interrupting the narrator's composure. But the narrator does not draw back, and after some time decides to open the lantern again. And this time, a single thin ray of light shines out and lands precisely on the evil eye of his father, revealing it that it is wide open. This drives the man into a frenzy. He hears the old man's watch clicking, clocking back and forth, and of course, he hears the old man's own heart beating loudly and dangerously fast from the terror of seeing his son standing there in the doorway with the light. The narrator decides it's now or never. He jumps, he strikes at his father, he grabs the pillow, and he starts to smother with it until he draws his last breath and he fights no longer. The man, out of the goodness of his heart, then begins to dismember his father's body and decides the best way to get rid of it is to conceal the pieces underneath the floorboards of the bedroom and wait until the proper time to get rid of it later. Ensuring that this concealment will finally guarantee that he will be proven sane. After successfully concealing his father's body underneath the floorboards of the room, he realizes that he's done something terrible, but he's done it in such a very unique way that there is no way he could possibly be insane. He thinks to himself that he has gotten away with the perfect murder and that no one will suspect him, of all people, of killing his own father. And now that he's finally rid with the evil eye, he decides that he will take the rest of the weekend off and merely relax. However, he forgets that his father had a job and that his absence has gone unnoticed. Many people decide to ask him, "What has become of your father?" And he merely says, "Oh, he's merely in the country. There's nothing to worry about." However, the people who ask him these questions are not completely convinced, especially when they see his twitchy eye. They decide that it's best to call the police and to have them solve the mystery of the missing man. The police come knocking on the man's door. At first, he's very taken aback, wondering, what could they possibly be doing here? I committed the perfect murder. There's no way they could suspect me. No, it's impossible. In his arrogance, he opens the front door and invites the policemen in. The man is confident that the police will not find any evidence of the murder, and decides that he will give them a tour of the house, making sure to keep up his best attitude and his best manners. That way the police think he's the most excellent gentleman there ever was. Eventually they reach his father's bedroom. As they search, he decides that there is absolutely no way they will know that his father's remains are underneath the floorboards of the very room. And in his arrogance, he decides to bring some chairs in and asks the policeman to sit down and have some tea. This is where he makes his first mistake. As they sit in the old man's room, on the very spot where the body was concealed, the policemen suspect nothing, as the narrator has a pleasant and easy conversation with them. But then, as the conversation continues and the time continues, he begins to hear the ticking of the clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. But then he has a sudden realization, the man. He realizes there is no clock in this room. How could there be a tick-tock? And then it dawns on him. His father was wearing his watch when he was killed. And now that watch is underneath the floorboards with his father's remains. The man begins to have a bit of a panic. If he begins to sweat, as this conversation continues with the policeman, he hopes that they do not hear the tick-tock and make the same realization as he did. As time continues to go on, all he can hear is the ticking of the clock on his father's watch. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Every minute feels like an hour. The policeman's conversation gets longer and longer, and he realizes, could these policemen know already? Could they know that I've murdered my father? Could they know that his body is underneath us as we speak? No, they couldn't. Unless they're playing dumb. Unless they're doing this to drive me to become insane. Which, it seems to be working. Yes, that is the only solution. As the ringing continues in the man's ears, the ringing grows louder and louder. The narrator comes to the conclusion that the policeman will surely find out no matter what that his father's body is underneath their very feet. He then decides enough's enough, and he begins to confess to the murder, saying that yes, I murdered my father. I dismembered his body. I put him underneath the floorboards. He then begins to tear the floorboards apart. The policeman is shocked as the man is ripping apart the floor. He then has a sudden smile come upon his face. And he says, "Dear officers, I've made a grave mistake. That tick-tock sound was not my father's watch. It was his heart." And that is the end of this wonderful tale. Truly a spooky story. I truly believe Edgar Allan Poe really had a lot of fun writing this one. I think it's a very excellent story to stay around the campfire. Don't you agree? Yes, I know what time it is. I will be with my guest shortly. I just need to finish the story up, okay? Thank you. Imagination is a very wonderful thing to have, but when it's dark and you're walking a midnight mile on a lonely countryside, those shadows you see begin to twist and breathe, turning into all manners of ghouls and monsters, and then they reach out and grab you. Do they? Or is it just your imagination? Carl, get out of here. Hey, don't you know we're mocking here? We're filming here. Go. Okay. Hey, Carl. Thank you, Carl. And that's when they made me their king. Oh, hello, Jimmy. I was just wrapping up my stories here. Wait, what? What about the guests? Wow. What? The guests are leaving? You didn't tell me?
Dump your idiot boyfriend.
Let's get out of here. This party stinks.
I know. Like, where was the host the whole time? I can't believe him.
Wait.
Well, maybe he was busy.
Why are you leaving the party so early?
I'm sorry, darling, but I have to breakfast at Tiffany's in the morning.
Well, happy Halloween.
You know, scaring people's all fun and games. But now that I'm alone, I'm getting a little scared myself. In fact, I sense a presence here, and it's not human.
A distinct impression that there was someone in this house other than the people I invited. It's nerve-wracking, actually. You know, it's perfectly fine when, I have people over, but when I'm alone, I'm very scared. I just don't know what it's like. Just the fear of opening the door. Hey, Carl, thanks for the fun, but I think you got a little too much to drink, okay? I think we should call you a taxi or something. Oh, well, hey, thanks for coming, all right? Hey, happy Halloween, all right? All right. Midnight. The witching hour. my favorite time.
Congrats, Wanderer. You have survived this far, and for that, I salute you. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have tonight. I'd like to thank all my guests for coming this fine hunting evening. You have just escaped the vortex of darkness. Now you can return to your boring, mundane existence. But wait, you forgot something. Your soul.